know that most of what you've seen, read, or heard about Billy the Kid is untrue? My name is Gail Cooper. I'm a medical doctor and forensic psychiatrist. My specialty is murder case consultation for the defense. For 20 years, I've used my expertise to uncover the real Billy the Kid. Researching over 40,000 pages of archival documents and books, I've written the revisionist history. It's shocking, it's liberating, and I've written books demolishing the hoaxes, hijacking the history. My talks will share with you what I've found. Cover-ups, misinformation, and fakery, to use Old West lingo, will bite the dust. This talk is about the only person who figured out how to profit legitimately from the Billy the Kid imposter hoax of Brushy Bill Roberts. The information is from my book, Cracking the Billy the Kid Imposter Hoax of Brushy Bill Roberts. Since the tale of Brushy Bill Roberts being Billy the Kid was a hoax, everyone involved in passing it off as true history was either a charlatan or a dupe. Its stench of wrongdoing seemed inescapable as it rolled along through the second half of the 20th century. Oliver Pleasant, Brushy Bill Roberts himself, was a mentally and vocationally impaired person, consoling himself with delusions of grandeur. Dressed in homemade duds of a movie cowboy, he performed his imaginary personas for family caretakers or buttonholed passers-by in Texas towns he inhabited. Pretending to be 20 years older, he claimed to be, or to know, a kaleidoscope of famous frontier people from 2 decades before his actual birth. He became Frank James, brother of Jesse James, friends with Belle Starr and the Younger Gang, a bronco buster, an Old West showman, an international cattle rancher, and a Pinkerton detective or other lawman. One of his personas changed his life. In the 1930s, he became Billy the Kid. That alone wouldn't have elevated him from a forgotten street busker. But in 1949, he met a traveling salesman named William V. Morrison, who had a sideline of promoting Old West imposters. Morrison, himself impersonating an attorney, recognized that Brushy had a great story. It was that he, as famous Billy the Kid, had survived the famous Pat Garrett shooting in Fort Sumner. The great story came with a great publicity hook. Either Morrison or Brushy thought up petitioning New Mexico's governor for the pardon originally promised to Billy the Kid by Governor Lew Wallace in 1879. Though Brushy astoundingly got the pardon hearing in 1950, he was judged an imposter amidst massive press and died of a likely stress-induced heart attack in less than a month. That freed Morrison to create a better Brushy, to better sell the great story, even aiming for roping movie cowboy Gene Autry or producer Howard Hughes. Morrison also used a complicit English teacher and wannabe historian named C.L. Sonishin to write Brushy's book. It was accepted for the University of New Mexico Press by its duped director, Edward Beverly E.B. Mann. It came out in 1955 as Alias Billy the Kid, with Sonneshan and Morrison as authors, and with the hoax premise of proving that Brushy had been Billy the Kid. E.B. Mann never wised up. 26 years after the publication, he still promoted Brushy in a July of 1981 Field and Stream magazine article titled Billy the Kid. He wrote, "It's a great story, and it could be true." Decades passed, with more dupes becoming torchbearers for Brushy. In 1998, a country music singer named W.C. Jameson and a now deceased novelist named Frederick Bean published their book, The Return of the Outlaw Billy the Kid. Though taken in by the Brushy scam, they expanded the great story by slipping in new historical information unknown to Brushy to beef up his so-called special knowledge, cleaned up his rabid racism and bad grammar, and added conspiracy theories to rationalize his rejection as an imposter. But the scholarly historians of the later 20th century merely ridiculed the hoax. Morrison died in 1977, though Sonneshan, living to 1991, secretly encouraged authors like Jameson and Bean to continue Brushy's tale. Things got worse. In 1987, Brushy's niece and part-time caretaker Geneva Pittman exposed his birth date, proving he was under 2 at Billy the Kid's killing. The great story was stuck in the mud. The great story also had an obstacle, besides reality, to being a great story. Brushy, a pretty good storyteller, had nevertheless missed the bullseye in the crucial killing scene. His fiction had a dark, moonless night in Fort Sumner on July 14, 1881, with Pat Garrett and a posse pursuing him there as Billy the Kid. Brushy had himself, accompanied by a pal named Billy Barlow, who looked just like him. He had Barlow go to the Maxwell's house to get some beef for a late dinner. In the dense darkness, Barlow was mistaken for him as Billy the Kid and was killed by nameless possemen. So, Brushy's ho-hum gist was an accident by a nameless killer. Brushy had intuitively tried to pump excitement into this anticlimax by putting himself in a cowboy movie-style shootout with that posse, in which he was hit in places corresponding to real scars from his farm labor work, which he'd display as bullet wounds for his Billy the Kid act. But something was missing. The great story also had a dirty underbelly. It was a lie. And if that wasn't unsavory enough, it was a lie based on defaming famous and honorable lawman Pat Garrett by accusing him of hiding the Billy Barlow murder to collect the Billy the Kid reward. Pat's son, Oscar Garrett, a participant in Brushy's pardon hearing, enraged by that slander, had even threatened legal action. It took a clever person to find their way through the Brushy hoax's minefield of evils to reach the jackpot of its great story without being tainted. That occurred 40 years after the pardon hearing declaring Brushy an imposter. The person's name was John Fusco. His location was the pinnacle lusted after by Morrison and Sonneshan, and maybe even by Brushy himself, Hollywood. In Hollywood, fact and fiction can be blurred guilt-free with claimed motive of entertainment and real objective of getting rich. Brushy Bill's great story was a perfect fit, once recognized by award-winning screenwriter and producer Fusco, who had adequate indifference to truth in a medium making no claim of truth. In 1990, John Fusco's movie titled Young Guns 2 came out. By it, he made Brushy's fabrications mainstream. And it wasn't his problem that the public believed it was the history of Billy the Kid instead of just a great story. When gauging a great story, one has to admit that Brushy's fantasy tale hit an archetypal nerve. There is defying of death after a life of daring do, and there is the discovery that an ordinary old Texan coot was actually the most famous Old West outlaw of them all. But John Fusco did more than getting Brushy on the big screen. He brilliantly filled in the missing piece of the great story to make it greater. His Young Guns 2 Brushy, as Billy the Kid, is spared death by Pat Garrett himself because he's Billy's buddy. This friendship is so strong that Garrett murders an innocent victim so Billy can be free to ride off into the sunset. So John Fusco added an epic bromance to Brushy's creation. And the movie made $44 million, which is almost $95 million today. John Fusco's Young Guns 2 has an old Brushy Bill narrating his story to a young historian, just like the original hoax, name-dropping substitutes for history. Emilio Estevez is Billy the Kid, a leader of an outlaw gang known as the Regulators. Cattle King John Chisholm pays Pat Garrett to kill Billy. As Billy's super friend, Garrett only pretends to do the deed, and no disclaimer was offered to say that Fusco's fiction was in fact. In reality, not only did real Garrett kill real Billy on July 14, 1881, but they weren't friends, and Garrett tried hard to kill him. Before capturing him at Stinking Springs on December 22, 1880, Garrett had accidentally missed him twice. First, in a Fort Sumner ambush 3 days earlier, in which his bullet fatally hit Tom O'Folliard instead. Then, in the early morning of the Stinking Springs ambush, Garrett shot dead Charlie Bowdry, mistaking him for Billy when he emerged from the rock house wearing Billy's distinctive sombrero. And there's no doubt that he would have hanged Billy in Lincoln on May 13, 1881, if Billy hadn't escaped his jail. John Fusco's fiction got him more than box office success. Brushy Bill true believers and hoaxers were poised to make him their champion, like the second coming of William V. Morrison. So Fusco was sought out at the 2003 start of the massive Brushy-based Billy the Kid case hoax and interviewed for that hoax's Promoting True West magazine's August-September edition. A staff writer interviewed Fusco for an article titled Digging Up Billy. If Pat Garrett didn't kill the kid, who's buried in his grave? The answer was supposed to be a stranger or even Billy Barlow, and John Fusco was positioned for that punchline. Instead, he was frustratingly honest, saying that he didn't believe Brushy was Billy, but his movie had made a lot of money. That was John Fusco's other brilliant addition to the Brushy tale. He simply sold its great story as a great story. So, traveling salesman, pseudo-lawyer, con man, William Morrison had been right all along. Brushy was a great product. But John Fusco became the hoax's beneficiary by transporting it into show business make-believe. That left him as morally clean as a newborn babe, while he arguably did more damage to Billy the Kid history than all the hoaxers combined. The hoaxers and dupes had labored mightily and lied grimly to hide the fiction. Fusco simply sold the fiction and didn't care what people believed. In reality, Young Gun 2's viewers left theaters believing that Pat Garrett hadn't killed his pal, Billy the Kid, and an innocent victim lay in Billy's Fort Sumner grave. And Brushy's promoters realized that this formula was a proven bonanza, beating the original hoax's special knowledge ploy. With new momentum from Fusco, charlatans and dupes were poised for an encore, as was the now receptive public. All the Brushy hoax needed was a publicity-seeking New Mexico governor as indifferent to truth as John Fusco. Then the best publicity hook of all could be offered again: the gubernatorial pardon of Brushy as Billy the Kid. The talks to follow expose the 21st century self-promoting New Mexico governor who did recycle the Brushy Bill tale in arguably the biggest historical forensic hoax ever perpetrated. He and his complicit public officials named it the Billy the Kid case. I named it the Billy the Kid case hoax.